go ahead and take our seats and get going.
Recording in progress.
Okay, thank you. It is 9:11 and I hereby call this meeting to order. We will begin with the Pledge of Allegiance. Mr. Knox, would you please lead us? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, moving on to item 3. Do we have any requests for just cause?
David.
Yes.
Sorry, just one. I lost my documents.
Has requested just cause, and that will be counted against his limit.
Got it. Thank you. All right, moving on to item 4, approval of the minutes.
Full approval.
Thank you, Mr. Santos.
I'll second that.
Thank you, Mr. Green. Roll call.
Okay. Mr. Knox,
Aye.
Mr. Green,
Aye.
Mr. Santos.
Yes.
Mr. Jason Green,
Aye.
Mr. Jones,
Aye.
Mrs. Jones,
Aye.
Ms. Sanchez.
Aye.
Okay, the motion passes unanimously.
Super. Any requests for public comment?
Do I need a vote?
Oh, Mr.
Oh,
Root.
I'm so
There
sorry,
you are.
Mr. Ruth.
I
Okay, I'll make sure I include that. Public comment, none.
Okay, no request for public comment. Let's begin with our executive update, the Chief Investment Officer's report.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good morning, Madam Chair, trustees. I want to thank Jude for driving slides today. And a lot has happened since we met last month.
Last 24 hours.
Yeah. We've had stress events both in the US and in Europe in our banking system over the last month. And some of those are referenced in the CIO report on slides 7, 20, and 22, and I'll talk about that. And before we turn to slide 9, so Jude can turn to slide 9, but I'll pause based upon the committee meeting that we just had. And I thought it was an outstanding committee meeting. I thought we had terrific speakers, and it really caused me to reflect on this report. And in this report, there's lots of numbers, and the numbers are about financial capital. There's very little about human capital. And human capital, I think, is reflected on one page in terms of the number of vacancies, and that's it. Yet, when I do sleep, and when I sleep, I don't necessarily worry about the investment portfolio, which I do, but my biggest, because I think that it's well invested, it's diversified, we've got good partners, I worry about human capital. I worry about our team. I worry about the teams that we oversee indirectly, and that's our biggest risk. It's human capital. And I think that the discussion this morning is really topical. And once again, we've got lots of numbers, lots of metrics about investments, about financial performance, but very little about human capital, which our financial capital is wholly dependent upon. So once again, thank you, Dale and Scott, for putting together those speakers. If we turn to slide 9, which we're on, thank you, Jude. The fund performance, a financial number, was through the end of February, it was down 1.5% net. AUM, or assets under management, are 71.3 billion, higher today, which is nice. Cash, which is in the bottom middle of 952 million, is on target. And on the right side it shows where we stand at the functional asset category level, and we are solidly within our bands, really spot on target. And I know that this is something that we will begin this summer looking at our strategic asset allocation to see where over time those bands shift. And if we could turn the page. So the top of this page has our performance over various time horizons compared to benchmarks. Once again, financial numbers, fiscal year to date through the 10-year periods. We are ahead of our benchmarks on an annualized basis. Short term, in the 1 and 3 months, we are not. We're lagging our benchmarks. We'll have detail about that in our quarterly performance book when we get there. But as it relates to, I'll focus on two that in these periods are lagging their benchmark: growth and credit. Then long term, they're very solid, good long-term performers. We do it well. In the short term, those asset categories have components that are very hard to benchmark. They contain illiquid and private investments. The benchmarks are not investable. There's a spread to an underlying index, which makes it hard to replicate just through public markets. And the valuations are done infrequently, which makes it really hard in short-term periods to benchmark. Longer term, you can see that we're doing well. This shortcoming was really pronounced in the month of February. Private equity was flat, and private equity is part of our growth bucket. And being flat in February is typical. It's the middle of a quarter. Those valuations are only updated quarterly with adjustments for cash flows. Yet the benchmark was up 8% for the month because public markets, which is the main component of our private equity benchmark, was up significantly in November. So this is reported with the 3-month lag. So we're really seeing the impact of November in the February performance book as it relates to the growth benchmark. And as a result of this, private equity is over 100% of the fund underperformance for the month. Just because private equity is flat, the benchmark's up 8%. We multiply that by 17%, which is our target allocation. That works out to the number, the 120 basis points or so of underperformance for the month. So, and I'll further discuss illiquid credit. That benchmark is lagged by 1 month, not 3 months, as in the case of private equity. And that has a 150 basis point premium to liquid credit. So that benchmark for the month was up somewhere, or the components of that benchmark were up somewhere between 300 and 400 basis points for the month. And if you add the 150 basis point spread, that means that we're trying to get 5% in a month for credit, which is very difficult to do. Those are steady performers that aren't going to have the big peaks that or troughs that private markets, or pardon me, that public markets may have. So short term, these benchmarks are tough. They create some noise in our performance reports. Hopefully it reverses next month in the right direction for us. But I think it's important for us as we go through our strategic asset allocation exercise, which we do every time. Towards the end of it is we do a benchmark analysis just to make sure that we've got the right benchmarks. And I know that Makita gave a presentation about components of what makes a good benchmark. And I think the board did a very deliberate, diligent job in choosing benchmarks, which we'll continue to do. OPEB is at the bottom of the page. It was down 2.6% for the month. AUM in the OPEB trust is $2.7 billion. That portfolio continues to grow, and it will continue to evolve as we implement private markets. And Jude, if you could turn to slide 22, please. So I'll talk a bit here about the stress in the regional bank system in March. And this slide presents a perspective. I want to thank the team for this chart. A lot of work went into what appears to be a pretty simple chart. And we'll walk around starting on the upper left in counterclockwise direction. So the chart on the top left shows our direct holdings in regional banks, mostly in our growth portfolio, some debt exposure. So at the beginning of March, our exposure to US regional banks was about $270 million. The smaller circle on the right shows represents some of the challenged or failed banks. And that amount was $14 million, which were our direct investments, not deposits, but direct investments in those banks. The footnote 2, I know that the font is pretty small, but the footnote number 2 identifies losses as of the end of March. And it's estimated that those losses are about $9 million out of a $71 billion portfolio. So I hate saying that anything with $1 million is immaterial. Any loss is meaningful, but $9 million compared to a $72 billion fund, given that the fund on any given day is going to move more than 10 basis points, that's not the biggest movement. That $9 million may recover some of it. A little over half of that, or $5 million, is a permanent loss in Silicon Valley Bank. So we'll go to the bottom left, and this really illustrates the point about the benefits of diversification and the materiality, the performance impact. So what this chart shows, it compares the performance of the U.S. regional bank stocks, which are the bigger gray bars, to the performance of the fund and the fund performance benchmark. Our policy benchmark is the light blue. The total fund performance is the darker blue. So there's lots of volatility and material movement in the regional bank index. You can see that moved on a couple of days, close to 10%, more than 10%, up, 3-4%, up 5%. So it's pretty, material movements in that index. Yet the impact on the fund was very muted. You can see here, it's just a matter of basis points, less than 1% up and down. And it's muted for what was front page news, not in the business press, but in the global press. Top of the, pick your favorite network, your news outlet, across all media, this was the top story, and it impacted our industry, being that this is, financial capital, yet the impact on the fund was, pretty immaterial. And once again, this goes to the benefits of diversification. The upper right is our indirect exposure. This explores our business partners, be it some of the money managers we work with, and what their relationships were with Silicon Valley Bank, First Republic, and Signature. And if you add up the 4 columns, they sum to 127. So we had 127 relationships that banked with or through, not necessarily deposits, but may have had cash flows or may have done payroll through those 3 institutions. And we are not aware of any losses to our capital that flowed through any of those institutions. So through those 127 relationships, no losses to LACERA. And once again, another shout out, and this goes maybe to how I started this morning by talking about the importance of human capital, is the team, our team, was extremely diligent, was proactive, reaching out to all our business partners, was checking the status of capital calls, trying to stop certain capital calls that had some time before they had to be funded. And the work was phenomenal during this period. The team was, very diligent, a certain shared sense of pride, and that goes to the criticality of human capital management. Because absent human capital management, who knows, if we would have the information that we shared with the board in real time, and if we'd have this information with kind of a deeper dive today. On the bottom right talks about our cash, our deposits. Our custody bank is State Street. State Street, as it says here, is a globally, systematically important financial institution. I can't say it once correctly, try to say that 10 times fast, and it may be challenging. But they are the custody for our cash, the $952 million that was on the slide that we discussed earlier. I don't know if it was 9 or 10. They're also our cash manager. And that as a globally systematically important financial institution, they are held to a higher regulatory standard than the banks that may have had issues in our indirect exposure, the Silicon Valley banks. And I think that we should all take comfort in that greater level of regulatory scrutiny and greater oversight of the cash that we need to implement our portfolio, that we need to pay benefits. So I think that, and there are no losses, obviously, in that. So I think that that's something that is extremely important. I know as part of the analysis that was done as part of the custody bank RFP, I think it was done last year or so, was that we revisited the cash relationships. So thank you, team, for the slide and for all the hard work on protecting and perfecting our members' capital. And if we turn to the last slide, I'll discuss slide 23. This is a follow-up to the last BOI meeting. Mr. Santos asked a question about contributions and investment earnings in the OPEB trust. So this bridge shows that. It shows the contributions in the $2.2 billion, the investment earnings, and where it says net investment gains next to that in the darker blue. It also shows administrative expenses and redemptions, which are relatively small numbers. And there has been one redemption or series of redemptions from superior courts when they withdrew in 2018 about $3.8 million. And with that, Madam Chair, happy to stand for some questions.
Thank you. So yes, I feel like it has been a year since we've met, and it just has been a very traumatic month. Are there any questions or comments?
Yes,
Yes, Mr. Santos.
thank you. Thank you for your presentation, Mr. Grable. I agree with you 100% of what you were saying, and the only area that I'm going to respectfully push back just a little bit is on the 9 million. I get it in the total picture. And again, I agree with you 100%. $9 million when we're dealing with 70 billion fund, it's de minimis. But as a member, I wondered how many the benefits can we pay with 9 million, right? I mean, that's really at the end of the day, that's a responsibility here. But I do understand, Mr. Grable, that in this business, we went through it in 2008 with it was billions that we lost. So yeah, that's the nature of the business we are in. But I just want to remind everybody that from my perspective, we lose a penny is too much for me personally. So we just need to keep that in mind. And hopefully we get to hear from the CEO regarding the members that are going to be highlighted today, because to me, that's a reminder of why are we here. So, and again, respectfully, because it's not your fault, it's beyond your control completely in terms of what happens in the industry. But I just felt like I needed to say that. The other issue that I wanted to raise is just that I'm just totally disappointed in the politicians. So we had the guy Frank, who was the one of the authors of the Dodd-Frank legislation, and then when he left office, he became the biggest advocate to deregulate, which, in my view, it led to what's going on in the banking industry today. But it just, I have to say, what a pig, because to me, he's a pig. How can, on the one hand, when he's a legislator, advocate for one thing, and then chases the money, because I'm sure he's getting a lot of money, and supported the deregulation in the banking industry. So if anybody should be liable for that, should be representative. So, and with regards to the OPEB, thank you for that information. I just, it is very important that we continue to pre-fund the OPEB trust because, and correct me if I'm wrong, the unfunded liability is still up to what, $20 billion, I believe, is the unfunded liability for OPEB. So this is something that we need to keep in mind all the time. That, well, yes, we're doing good, and the county is doing good, and the unions have been able to negotiate with the county to make sure that the county continues to pre-fund OPEB trust, but we have a long way to go. $20 billion, it will keep me up at night. But overall, again, all my comments over here, very respectful to you, Mr. Grable, because my view, you do a great job. And I know that this is very important to you. So those are my comments.
Okay. I'm going to take chair. Do you have any comments? I'll take chair's prerogative just to remind our members that as a plan, in order to ensure that we meet the minimum hurdle rate, we must by definition take risks. If we were to ensure that we never lose a penny, we would also ensure that we would not be able to pay the promised benefits. That would be a given. So knowing something with certainty does not always make it a benign outcome. If you jump out of a plane without a parachute, you know the outcome, but it is not a benign one. So we do, as a matter of business, take prudent risks. And I do think, and I will highlight that though some of the risks did not pan out, that we did keep them diversified, appropriately minimal to the portfolio. And I think given what happened, that is a sign of prudence. So I don't want to give our members the impression that there is a such thing as a free call on the market where you participate in all of the upside with none of the downside. That is the business that we are in, and it is why we have to spend so much time doing it. Mrs. Jones.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I agree with the trustees, both trustees. I do understand the importance of, preserving every dollar that is in the fund. And to that effect, I do have a question, Mr. Grable, and I appreciate all of the information you provided here with the slide on the banking. And I also appreciate, I know all the work staff probably did behind the scenes in ensuring that it was just a $9 million loss and it wasn't bigger than that. But my question is, I have two questions. My first question is there anything we can glean from this experience as we move forward? Not saying that we'll mitigate risk all the time going forward as a result of the lessons that we pull from this, but are there things that we could have done better or that we can look forward to improving on, just getting through this? Usually there's, even getting through COVID, there's things we can get from this experience as we move forward. And you may not have an answer today, but maybe, it's something that we could, look forward to. And I think it's important for the members to hear as well as, what we're getting from this, event.
Madam Chair, if I may, I do have a takeaway, and it predates this. We put in place a crisis response plan fortuitously before the pandemic. Better to be lucky than good, but you make your luck in some sense. And then as an organization, all of LACERA, we do various tabletop business continuity exercises. And one of them was that there was an impact on our ability to get cash. And what would we do? And it's not on this slide, but one of the things that we do have is we have a sizable account that that is not at State Street, that is, board approved account that went through an RFP with a pool of assets, a sizable pool of liquid assets to help us in that situation. That we're not, I think it's important to have everything consolidated at State Street, but we also have to have a functional plan B that can last months or years potentially. And, you think about what is the most liquid investment that we have, and US government bonds, and part of that account is custodied at that manager's custodian, which is not at State Street. And I think that is my takeaway, that we saw from the month of March, that there's benefits to that.
Thank you. And I think that speaks volumes because as Chair Sanchez indicated, we realize that we're in a space to generate the largest profit that we can for the members to be able to pay. It is sometimes a risk involved, but having those things in place is essentially like having an EOC, an Emergency Operations Center, that when those things happen, you activate it, you go into motion, and you have the backup plan. So thank you for that. And then my second question, which was, always to my favorite slide, which is the staff chart of the month in your report. And so I found it very interesting. It's talking about the bond volatility, and it's correlating what's going on today to a spike that occurred in 2008, and we all remember 2008. And so I was just curious if there's any insight to this, thinking back to our previous discussion about, activating the EOC. Is this anything that we should be concerned about or be aware of? Obviously 2008 didn't bring great fond memories in the market. So I was just curious.
And a thought for the board to consider is that today is, well, it's a kind of an obvious statement, different than 2008 in the sense that the 2008 crisis was a credit event. The 2023 event was an interest rate one, that it's just basic bank management of asset liability management was very different than levered credit, which was really the issue, and how that permeated the leverage on leverage throughout the global financial system in 2008. So I think it's different today. I think that but we're in an environment with interest rates, yes, and as well as inflation at generational highs. And I think that we don't know how that's going to play through the financial system, our portfolio, the economy, both here and abroad. And I think that it will be, and I know we discussed this last month, is as we look at our capital market assumptions going into the new strategic asset allocation, I think that they'll be reflective of higher interest rates, and that fundamentally changes how you asset allocate a portfolio. And if you're trying to get 7%, you can, in some sense, we may not need the portfolio we have today. We may be able to take some risk off the table, or we keep the same portfolio and expect higher returns.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Green, Jason Green.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, I just for information for the board, and as Mr. Santos said, loss of funds in any amount, right? The appearance of it, and I just wanted to let the board know, and I agree, and I appreciate Ms. Sanchez addressing it, and also Ms. Jones, that there is risk, right? That's what you can't have a gain without risk, but I fielded calls from memberships because of media hyperbole. Which they're worried about this. That had concerns about the security of the fund. They thought it was going to collapse.
That's right.
And perceived threat, right? It's perception. So it's not. You can't diminish someone's concern or fear. So. But, and the presentation is great. I want to thank the staff for putting that together, but it's also too being able to weather it because it is an unpredictable event, and having that diversity, and just echo, what Madam Chair said as far as ensuring confidence in the members, LACERA's ability to weather something, an impact like that. Even if it was a small meteor, there could be a larger meteor
Right
impact.
behind it.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's it.
Thank you,
Just-
Mr. Green. And I agree with that. I'll take the last question. Cash is the unsexy part of the portfolio. It's the one analyst that gets assigned that segment of the portfolio just asks the question over and over, what have I done? And yet, in moments, in crises like this, cash flow is air to funds. Cash is how you pay your liabilities. Cash is how you manage. And without air, as a fund, you die. And so I do think that I'm glad to hear that the first thing we did was evaluate our cash management, which is what a lot of folks did. And I think that we should continue as a takeaway to, see what we can do there. Again, the unsexy part of the portfolio, but still a part of the portfolio that in moments of crisis is the most important part of the portfolio. The second thing I will ask is, the question as to whether or not, we know that 2008 was a credit-driven crisis, and we are currently on the narrative right now that today is a liquidity-driven crisis, that the value is there. These banks are not insolvent. They're simply locked up in treasuries and MBS and other instruments that have taken a hit because of interest rate rises, but time will solve that problem. Those are all worth the par that they are allowed to be marked at. However, if everybody comes to the bank at the same time, whether virtually or directly, they can ask for their money. The banks would be forced to take losses that they wouldn't have otherwise been forced to take. So if indeed this is just simply a liquidity crisis, one that time and faith in the system will solve, then that is great. The bigger question is, does this rise in cost of capital germinate into an actual credit crisis? And I think everybody's pointing right now to the commercial real estate space and the fact that the largest lenders into that space are actually the very small and community banks that are lending into that segment of the business of industry. Do we, or are we seeing a weakening of conditions such that commercial real estate may be at risk for a potential credit event?
And Madam Chair, I don't have the answer. I wish I had the crystal ball. I think that one potential answer is, and I think it was in not today's print version, but the online version of the Wall Street Journal, where they talked about, or maybe it was the print version, that US GDP is being lowered by the IMF, or maybe it's the IFC, because of that very fact that you discussed, that it is the role of local banks in getting credit out there. And if they have to keep more reserves, there's less air, to use your analogy, in terms of access to cash. There's less air or oxygen in our economy. And so my takeaway from that is yes.
Okay, got it. Well, so we're going to earn our keep this year. And then my last comment is on slide 20. It looks like, getting back to the human capital question, it looks like out of 10 open vacancies that we have, 7 are now in progress, and there are only 3 that are remaining to be started in terms of progress. That looks like a significant improvement from the last time we had this discussion.
There is some progress.
Okay. Thank you for tempering my enthusiasm on that one. Great. Well, on that note, let's move on to our member spotlight.
Well, thank you very much, Chair Sanchez, and good morning, trustees. So this is something that we've started last month in the Board of Retirement, and will be a continuing feature in both board meetings, and that's taking a moment to recognize some members. As it was said earlier, that's what we're here for. We are here for our members, and taking a moment to recognize them, understand what they do, what their life goals are in terms of retirement in some cases, and just to serve as a reminder of why we're here. After all, we have over 100,000 active members and a sizable number of retired members, and we always need to keep that in mind. So this month, we are going to recognize Ricardo Toscana. He is retiring. He's a registered nurse too, out of the Department of Health Services, Rancho Los Amigos National Rehabilitation Center in Downey. He has 38 years of service, and he just really enjoys taking care of patients in a facility that sees about 2,500 patients a year. He went through his retirement process. Fortunately, he rated it as an easy process, which is what we want to hear. And he's looking forward to spending time with his family and doing some traveling. So this is exactly what we're here for. These type of folks that work hard to serve public of LA County, give of their life, and then so we give of our life in service to them. And so thank you very much, Mr. Toscana. And with that, I'll turn it back to you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Popovich. I love this addition. I think that it really does lend, a real grounding in why we're here and what we do. Mr. Green?
Just real quick, I wanted to thank you. I love that this has become part of the meeting agenda. And I just want to take a minute to have a staff spotlight on JJ Popovich, who has been unbelievably supportive and responsive of our members. I get calls from our members almost every single day, sometimes in really difficult, literally life or death situations. And JJ is always unbelievably responsive. He just handles it. And just, I want to say thank you to JJ for not just recognizing this member, but all the great work you do kind of behind the scenes. I just wanted to kind of lift up the great work he does and say thank you, JJ.
Well, thank you very much. I'm going to pass all of that on to my staff because I can't do anything without my staff. So I really appreciate all the backup and support that it makes, that hopefully makes me look good in most cases. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
It does.
Thank you. All right, moving on to item C, the Chief Executive Officer's report given today by Mr. Lugo.
Yes, good morning, Madam Chair. Good morning, trustees. And again, thank you, Mr. Popovich, for highlighting that member spotlight. I want to echo some of the comments that Mr. Grable made from the committee meeting earlier I think there's a lot of reflection going on. While the human capital measurement was a focus for our institutional investors as it relates to our diligence in analyzing not only potential investment partners, but opportunities. It also has a lot of relatable information as it relates to LACERA internally, how we go about our human capital and the efforts that we're making in terms of making sure that we have good insights as it relates to retention, attraction. So there was a lot of really good things that we gleaned from that presentation. We took notes, and certainly it highlights one of the priorities that we've outlined in our strategic plan document, which we look forward to presenting to the Board of Investments as well at a later date. But at a macro level, recruitment, where we are with recruitment, because it really does outline our human capital. So right now we stand at about 120 vacancies, which represents about 22% vacancy rate. In terms of our progress, in the next, I anticipate by the end of this fiscal year, we have 40 active recruitments where we're going to reduce our vacancy rate to about 15%. And to get a little bit more granular in terms of where those lie, our retirement benefit specialist positions, the new class starts in May. We have about 30 positions dedicated there, five of which will be dedicated to our retiree healthcare division. We also have active recruitments in investment, specifically the DCIO. We completed initial round interviews. Next steps will now go to the second round interviews. We also completed the list promulgation for the FA2, which accounts for about 4 vacancies. I appreciate Mr. Grable's staff efforts. I know they've been interviewing. A lot of interviewing has been going on across LACERA, actually. And then we also have 2 critical positions at LACERA, our information security officer, as well as our chief information technology officer's positions, which we've concluded final interviews, and we hope in the coming weeks to get offers out to those 2 respective candidates, and then many others. But I would anticipate about 40 positions in the next 2 to 3 months will be filled, which will reduce our vacancy rate to 15%. And our goal is really to get under 10%. So a lot of progress being made organizationally. Appreciate the efforts of those hiring managers conducting interviews and ensuring excuse me, that we have quality candidates, not only on the list, but also that we're going to be onboarding. Secondly, we sent a green memo item or a green folder item related to our general and retired member elections. So I just want to briefly just highlight some of the key dates on those and take any questions. A second here. So we have for the Board of Investments, we have two elections. We have the second member active as well as the 8th member retired. And for the Board of Retirement, we have a second member active, 8th member retired, and then also the alternate retired member. We anticipate on May 12th to start a notification as well as making sure that nominations to eligible voters are in. And then the nomination period will be from May 22nd till June 20th. And then the election announcement would be from June 26th till June 27th. So we will, in our CEO report, start reporting on the member elections and giving updates until the conclusion of that election. With that, I'll certainly stand for any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Knox.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Specific to the investment office, the timing of filling some of those key vacancies.
The DCIO, as I stated, is in next round interviews. The time frame for that, I would imagine by the end of the fiscal year, it could be sooner. But again, those are next round interviews. The financial analyst 2 positions, the list has been promulgated. There's 2 in credit and risk. There's 1 in real estate and 1 in portfolio analytics. I think those interviews have started. I don't want to speak for Mr. Grable's group, but I would imagine over the next 2 months, those positions will be filled by the end of the fiscal year, based on the fact that they're actively interviewed.
Okay, I would just emphasize expediting second round, whatever round, combined rounds. Those spots. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Knox. Mr. Santos?
Yes, I want to echo it's a nice comment that yes, we need to expedite it. It's really important that we have the entire organization, but in particular near and dear to me, because this is where we make the money, that we need to have the investment office to fully staff. It's critical that we do that. And also along the way, I will ask to take a look at, and I've been asking for this for a couple of years already, do a salary analysis. Because I want to make sure that we are paying the staff competitive salaries or better, because we need them. We need to, the only thing I can do, that's what I tell my relatives, the only thing I can do, I cannot fix your problems, but I can throw money at you. So perhaps when I can prevent you from going to another firm, but hopefully we are able to at least make you smile on your way to the bank and remember those benefits, right? That's what many of us are here. It's because of the great benefits that we get. But unfortunately, some younger people do not appreciate the benefits. So anyway, I do encourage you to do the salary analysis and also really take into evaluation incentive pay. We need to operate at that level. We already over 70 billion fund on the way to 100 billion. So we need to make sure that we are in a position to compete. And in human capital, as we've been hearing all morning, is very important. And with that, I want to also compliment the staff, Mr. Grable. Mr. Jones and I were in the infrastructure conference in Berlin, Germany. And I tell you, every other manager said, name somebody from the investment staff. We're working with this person, we're working with that person, we're providing that information. And you know, to me, that's fantastic news because that means we are doing what we need to do. Okay, rest assured that I will never undermine the staff in any way. It just makes me really happy to hear that they are in communications with you, and whatever your decision is, that's up to you, because eventually it comes to me as a recommendation. But it's really an honor to be out in different conferences and people coming up to us and providing compliments to the staff. So it is fantastic. So thank you for the highlighting the member. I'm sure Mr. Popovich is listening. Thank you very much, sir, and your staff. One minor adjustment to that is that perhaps in the future, we can actually film one of our members engage in some of the difficult tasks that us county employees have to perform. Because this is a good reminder that county employees do the work that other people will do, quite frankly. Certainly, in my position, if I was in private practice, I can be selective which clients I can take. As a county employee, I don't have the luxury. I have to take every client that comes in, irrespective of my feelings, beliefs, otherwise. So the work that we do is something that we need to remember as the reasons why we're here. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Santos. Mr. Jones?
Yes, the question as it relates to, again, the investment office component of it, is it our normal practice to give existing employees kind of first cut at the move up, or at the same time they're competing in real time with the open requisition that's open to everybody? Could you clarify that for me?
Yeah, Trustee Jones. So when we do a position requisition, we determine whether or not it's going to be promotional only or it's going to be open competitive. These particular positions are open competitive. So any internal staff for that matter, even outside of investments, can apply for these vacancies if they meet the minimum qualifications.
Okay, could you, and I'm not sure what the appropriate Robert Rules of Order thing here, but could you get to the board a report of how, what are the promotional opportunities and how well we're doing with existing staff? I'd just be curious, and then you can calibrate it for me just to know how well existing resources are advancing into new roles for that. And then outside the investment office is the same kind of procedure also. There's a promotional only category, and then you may go through that, or does it happen more oftentimes than not that it's kind of open and then it's a combination of internal and external?
Yeah, so the one classification outside of investments that has a promotional only is when we have our initial retirement benefits class, which is our kind of the feeder for our member operations group. That class, after a year, they all apply for what we call the RBS 2. So they come in as a retirement benefit specialist 1, and then after a year, they all apply to this retirement benefit specialist 2, which is a permanent position as opposed to a temporary position that they currently sit on. Otherwise, for most of our positions, we try to look at open competitive. We do have conversations with the hiring manager as it relates to whether or not we do promotion only. So it's that back and forth dialogue. There's no set criteria on which way we go.
Yeah, because I'd be curious to see if it has any impact, marginal or otherwise, on our time to hire. Because of course, anytime you have to go outside, there's a whole involved versus promoting from within. Thank you.
Okay, we've noted that as an item for follow-up. Mr. Green?
Thank you, Madam Chair. On the last month's Board of Investment meeting, it was 8B. There's a presentation we voted and approved for pushing on the county to increase our ordinance position authorization in the salary. Bear with me if I missed it in the report, and I apologize if I have, but can you speak to that? Is there any information on that? I know it was just last month, but what do they say?
So if Ms. Guglielmo, if I'll have our AEO over administration answer that.
Yep.
Good morning, Madam Chair and Trustee Green. That information, we don't have a response yet from the county. It usually takes several months, which is the reason we requested that authority well in advance of our budget request. The idea is we would like to have the flexibility of having those that authority as soon as possible, but I don't, unfortunately, do not have a response yet from the county on that action. So that has to be agendized and placed before the Board of Supervisors for action.
Gotcha. And I just follow up, as Mr. Knox said, and Mr. Santos, as far as expediting, is there a pathway or an option for that? To press them?
Well, I don't know that we can press the Board of Supervisors to act any sooner than they'd like, but we certainly try to maintain a good relationship with the CEO's office and express the importance of these positions to our work here. But those particular positions are on the member side, not so much the member facing side, not the investment side. We have all of the authority to fill the positions that we have currently vacant on the investment side of the house.
Okay. Okay, I think that concludes our questions. Thank you, Mr. Lugo. All right, moving on to our non-consent agenda. We have one item, the CFA Institute's Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Code Signatory. So, Mr. Drazel, will you be presenting or just discussing?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And good morning again, trustees. I'll speak a bit to this and hand it over to DDA. Item 7A, as referenced, is a recommendation for the board's consideration that LACERA become a signatory to the CFA Institute's DEI code. As trustees are aware, LACERA's investment policy statement explicitly incorporates into our investment strategy a recognition that organizations that access and manage talent of diverse backgrounds in an equitable and inclusive manner will produce better outcomes. We've sought to operationalize that policy position through LACERA's TIDE initiative, including internal practices, our diligence of external asset managers, as well as working with industry associations, such as CFA Institute, to identify and disseminate good practice. One of those organizations is obviously the CFA Institute, which, by way of background, administers the Chartered Financial Analyst professional designation. LACERA actually provides a financial incentive for staff to obtain the CFA designation. And we're pleased that about a third of the investment team has that CFA designation. The Institute also conducts research on investment industry practices, public policy, as well as DEI practices to try to disseminate good practice. We've been working with the CFA Institute as part of LACERA TIDE to convene regional roundtables and discussions with CFA members, as well as institutional investors, to share some DEI effective practices. And as DDA is going to discuss, the Institute recently worked with its membership base to launch this code, which seeks to measure the investment industry on where it's at in terms of which policies are in place, what demographics look like in different markets, as well as identify and share effective practices, and then facilitate reporting to monitor trend lines going forward. As noted in the material, there are over 100 signatories to date. It was just launched about a year ago, including CalPERS, CalSTRS, some other asset managers and large asset investment firms. And we think that our involvement with the code could help facilitate reporting templates. CFA Institute is working with its members in different markets, including some markets where there's not necessarily, there can be limitations to good information, as well as to exchange good practices. So I'll turn it over to Didier to talk through the details.
Thank you, Scott. Good morning, Madam Chair and trustees. The CFA DEI code was created in 2022 to elevate DE&I practices on a global basis for asset managers, asset owners, and consultants. As Scott mentioned, the CFA Institute has a very broad reach with 164,000 members across 151 countries. Every year, 140,000 people sit to take one of the CFA exams. So we think partnering with an institution like that could be helpful for us to broaden our reach. The creation of the code comes at a time when there's heightened awareness about elevating diversity, equity, and inclusion in this industry. And we think that the code provides a pragmatic approach for signatories to help not only influence, but also elevate their own practices. We think that there's symmetry between what we're doing in LACERA's towards inclusion, diversity, and equity, LACERA Tide, and the CFA DEI code. LACERA Tide, as a reminder, has 5 different facets or pillars to have a multi-dimensional approach to how we manage our internal practices, how we work with our business partners, how we work with our asset managers, and ultimately how we influence the industry. There's overlap with industry advocacy and internal practices with the CFA DEI code. Some of these overlap include widening the recruitment funnels, which we talked about today, having fair and inclusive promotional practices, and making sure that we also influence and demonstrate leadership amongst the industry. So the spirit of participating in the DEI code is that many of the items that we're doing in LACERA Tide are represented already in the CFA DEI code. We think that by becoming a signatory, we can amplify our efforts within LACERA Tide, as there are other potential signatories that come on board. As Scott mentioned, there's 100 and there could be potentially even more globally. There is no cost to joining and becoming a signatory. There's no upfront annual or ongoing costs. It's all covered by the administrative budget for the CFA Institute. And then there are a few additional merits that we believe that exist. The first is it's early in its adoption, it's early in its creation, and we think that we could share some input as a signatory. We also think in the same vein, we could learn from the CFA Institute and we can learn from other signatories and take back some best practices. And lastly, as Scott had mentioned, but it's worth reiterating, is that it could help us further understand the standardization of DEI disclosures on a more regional basis. So that concludes our background comments. I'll pause here and leave it for the board for any questions or comments.
Move approval.
Thank you.
I'll second that.
Thank you. And I have one quick question to our consultant, Makita, Mr. Festino. Will Makita be signing on as well?
Yeah, Makita already is.
You are already a signatory. Look at us influencing. Thank you. Do we have any other comments or questions? All right, let's take a roll call. Mr. Knox,
Aye.
Mr. David Green,
Aye.
Mr. Santos.
Yes.
Mr. Jason Green,
Aye.
Mr. Rue,
Aye.
thank you, Mr. Jones,
Aye.
Mrs. Jones,
Aye.
and Chair Sanchez. Aye. Thank you. And with that, let's go ahead and take about a 10-minute break and reconvene. Let's make it 10:20. Thank you. 10:21. I gave you an extra minute because I'm a kind, benevolent dictator.
Recording in progress.
Okay, so moving on to our reports. We have one report and we've had a request to pull item G. So we'll go over items A and G with the remainder being for information only. So we'll begin with the taxability of trustee travel expenses for board and committee meetings and other payments made to enable trustees to perform their duties. And before we begin, I just want to make the comment. I love that the short answer was 6 pages. That was the short answer. Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Jones. So I'll hand it over to Mr. Rice.
Good morning, Madam Chair and trustees. This item originated from a question that was asked by Trustee Onyx Jones in January when the travel policy was revised to include board meetings within the definition of reimbursable administrative meetings. In looking at this issue, we discovered that there had not previously been a tax opinion at LACERA on the broader subject of payments made to trustees, not simply the cost of attending meetings, but other benefits such as the offsites, technology, meals, and so forth. So we went out to tax counsel, and Jenny Kringle, our longtime outside tax counsel, is on the phone here. We got an opinion from her that addressed all of these issues. We have a 2-page public summary and then a longer privileged summary that's not part of the public record that's attached to the public memo. And at this point, Madam Chair, any questions can be directed to tax counsel.
Okay, so first, let me just say thank you to Ms. Jones. I think that that we had never had a tax opinion on this is the reason that we all sit here and look over everything. So that was a great catch. And do we have any questions? I read through it. It was very straightforward. So do we have any questions? Yeah. Yep.
My only question, and I think it's minor. Thank you for this information. It was very helpful. And I do understand the different components. And I'm trying to recollect what we approved previously, but I remember we had some language in the previous approval about the distance being a measurement for travel. And I noticed in the language here, it's not really specific on the travel. And I just wondered if there were any changes that needed to be made in what we previously approved, or does council feel like it is within the realm of what's outlined in your report?
Before Jenny answers, I'll just level set on the policy change. The proposal that was made by the chief executive officer was to have a time limit or distance limit attached to the ability to get reimbursement. At both the Board of Retirement and the Board of Investments, that was eliminated so that all administrative expenses of travel and so forth associated with any board meetings are within the definition of reimbursable administrative meeting. So that issue kind of went away.
Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, and I would just add to that, from a tax standpoint, there's nothing wrong with reimbursing for short distances for any travel, as Mr. Rice just described. The question is just whether that reimbursement then results in taxable income to the trustee who's being reimbursed. And so, at a high level, what we concluded is really the only time you're going to have a taxable expense reimbursement is when you've got these travel related expense reimbursements that are within the trustee's tax home.
Thank you.
Great. And thank you for that clarification. Okay. Any other comments? All right, moving on. Item G, we had a request to pull the selection of securities litigation monitoring and approved counsel. Mr. Herrera.
Good morning.
Thank
Chair
you.
Sanchez,
Get your
trustees.
microphone on.
Thank you. Thank you. Good morning, Chair Sanchez, trustees. We do have the report that we've prepared for and gave to your board. This is a follow-up from the September 2022 memo when we apprised the board that we were going through it. We are fortunate to have been joined by two members of the investment office, Mr. Drazel and Mr. Sinkandwap, and I'm happy to stand to any questions that the board may have.
Okay, Mr. Santos.
Yes, I do. Good morning.
Good morning.
So I was disappointed with your memo. And the reason for that, or for the reason for my disappointment, there was really no discussion on why this particular firm was selected, the DEI track record or lack of. And it is important that we as a board get granular information similar to the other reports that we get, because in this matter we delegated the final decision to the chief counsel, and so it disappoints me because that concerns me with the delegation of authority, that there is not a full granular memo that we can read and understand the decision making. That's one issue. The other issue is that some of the firms that were selected, there's been a lot of publicity or some publicity on ethical lapses. Certainly that's something that we should be told, that if the staff is aware of some of the ethical bad publicity that they have received, certainly it should be part of the memo where that was looked at, that was evaluated, and this is the reasons why we decided to hire this firm, notwithstanding the ethical lapses. The other disappointment is that out of, I believe, 8 firms that we retain, not one woman-owned firm. That's shocking to me. And the reason why it's so shocking to me is because, as you know, I'm in the legal industry, and the legal industry has been behind in diversity, especially gender diversity. Our office, public defender's office, for the past, I would say 20 years, we've been hiring women left and right. And at some point after I believe we had probably over 50% of the line attorneys are women. And the next step was through Public Defenders Union is, okay, we need to have these women in leadership as well. So it's surprising that there was not one woman on, unless I'm mistaken. And so, and again, I think that had the memo been more extensive, explaining what the ethical issues, the DEI, I know there was a survey done of DEI. Well, where's that information? Because one of the things that I have said here many times is not about dinging or rejecting a particular firm because they're lacking the DEI policies that we would like to see. But the idea is that we are aware of that, and then we make a commitment to work with this particular firm to get them up to speed. Because in 5 years, when we revisit these relationships, we'd be able to know whether or not this firm should be eligible for re-upping, so to speak. So I believe, whether through board direction or a motion that Madam Chair, I would reject this memo and instruct the staff to provide us with a full discussion of how this firms was selected, the ethical issues that have been raised by Bloomberg and other organizations, And also what efforts, if any, were made in trying to at least find one woman-owned firm that we can retain.
Mr. Rice, I'm going to take this over to you. What is the procedural process for something that has been selected by delegated authority?
Well, the policy provides that the results are reported to the board. That's why this item is on the agenda. It's our report of the selection process for the monitoring panel, the monitoring council, and pre-approved litigation panel. So we're giving it to you for review. If there are issues along the lines of what Mr. Trustee Santos has said, you can send the memo back to us. Our agenda provides that any item on the agenda can be subject to a motion. So there can be a motion on this item, returning it to staff, or we can just take it back, having heard the direction.
Okay, so we can move to refer back to staff if that's the requirement. If you want to make that motion.
Yeah, I move that we reject this memo and instruct the staff to provide the board with a memo outlining everything that I just said, the ethical issues, the diversity issues, and the reasons why, if there's a firm with ethical issues, why we decided to retain that firm as compared to others, and the issue of the women.
Okay, so we have a motion and we have a second by Mr. Green. So we will refer that back to you. As a matter of using this as a learning opportunity, I do think that the issues that Mr. Santos is raising are broader than this particular memo, which is that we are expecting a minimum set of information, sort of some minimum guidelines as to what should be a part of the transparency process for trust building for continued delegated authority, right? So what are we expecting as a board to be a part of these memos so that you're not caught off guard when your memo is overly summarized for various reasons, but are not meeting the qualifications. And we as an organization are moving towards enacting tide across the organization. And so just ensuring that we have the same scope and perspective. And I think, you know, Mr. Grable has set a very high bar with the team in the investment staff in terms of the level of detail that we are given as a board, and the sort of standardized approach that has now been taken across all of the asset classes. So, you know, you can turn and thank Mr. Grable for his high performance as to why you're going to be raised up by this. But I do think that is the responses that we should be raised up by this. So I think it's a broader discussion. For this, we have some immediate requirements, and you know, going forward, I think that the bar for delegated authority should be high. As an organization, we as a governance board are effectively extending trust and credibility to you, and that trust and credibility must continue to be earned every day. With that, Ms. Jones, did you have a question or? Okay. All right. Anything you want to let us know now, or do you want to save that for the?
I appreciate the feedback. I understand the directions that's been provided, and yeah, we will come back with a new memo for next month's meeting.
Okay, super. And thank you, Mr. Santos, for raising the issue. Of course. All right. So now
Madam
roll
Chair.
call. Yep, roll call. Oh, roll call. Sorry.
Mr. Knox,
Aye.
Mr. David Green,
Aye.
Mr. Santos.
Yes.
Mr. Jason Green,
All right.
Mr. Rue,
Yes.
Mr. Jones.
Aye.
Mrs. Jones.
Aye.
Chair Sanchez.
Aye.
Okay, the motion passes unanimously.
Okay. Thank you. And so moving on, item 9, items for staff review.
So we have 2 items. The first one was the board requested, or Mr. Jones requested, some information regarding internal promotions versus new hires. And Mr. Santos requested possibly having a video of the member during member spotlight.
Okay, thank you. Items for future agendas.
No, nothing.
Yep. And good of the order.
Can I start? Yeah. Mr. Knox?
Morning, everyone. Nice to see you back in person, Madam Chair, for steering the ship here with us. It was interesting listening to Mr. Grable's report this morning about the banking industry. Our Board of Supervisors had the Treasurer and Tax Collectors investment policy on their agenda early March, right after the banking information was hitting the news, and they asked me to talk about the impact, and we were fortunate. We had no exposure, we had no depository relationships, but it's an interesting discussion to have, because it turned a lot like Chair Sanchez talked about, where it's a discussion about liquidity and putting our money to work, and it's not fun and it's not exciting. And it's a good opportunity to explain what we do, but it's also a good reminder to be prepared for events like this. And just by happenstance, we had recently kind of worked on an investment strategy internally with my team, and just so we all sung from the same choir sheet when issues came up. And that was very handy in messaging the public and messaging our state association, our pool participants. So again, appreciating the job you did very much. So thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. David Green?
Good morning. Thank you again to Chair Sanchez, our staff. Great reports. Terrific. It's just so good to be back in person with you all. And I looked over at my colleague Herman Santos today, and I noticed he had a new pin on his lapel for 20 years of county service, but I think it's more closer to 27. Is that right? So just want to congratulate him on his many years of county service, and also for keeping us on track and kind of rowing in the same direction on these issues around diversity, equity, and inclusion. And really want to lift up and appreciate your comments, and thank you for being such an advocate for all of our members. I was thinking, conversations about human capital and labor issues and outsourcing. It feels like my day job, this whole meeting. So I just appreciate that the conversations are happening. And I tell you, I said it earlier today, I talk to our members every single day, and I get an opportunity to brag about our incredible board and our staff and our consultants and the great work we do at LACERA. The work that you all do every day allows people to retire with dignity and respect. And I don't ever lose focus of that, and neither should we. So just thanks a lot.
Thank you. Mr. Santos?
Yes, thank you very much. I want to thank the staff for all the work you do. I tell everybody, you're the ones who do the dirty work. And I appreciate all that. It is incredible and very fulfilling when I go out to the different conferences and staff members' names are being dropped. That means that you are up there, like you always do. And that gives me great confidence. I want to tell you that. Because 20 years ago when I started, there was no way I will support any type of delegated authority to the CIO, to anyone. I wanted to make sure that we make all the decisions. But what has brought me around? The fact that the staff, I have seen you over the years be so diligent and work so hard that it gives me confidence to support the delegated authority that we have given, or the limited delegated authority that we have given the CIO. That's because of you, the work you have done, and I've seen you. I've been next to you in some occasions, watching you do your work. And on behalf of all the members that I represent, including you, right? Because you're also a voter and a beneficiary of the plan. Thank you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart, because that's what gives me the ability to sleep at night. And I tell my wife when she tells me, talking about the banking situation, my wife said to me, are we going to have enough money there when I retire? Yes, plenty. And thank God for all the work that every single one of you do. And we don't pay you enough. But I just want to tell you that with great gratitude, I sleep well at night because you guys are with us. And of course, nevertheless, the leader has to be part of it, but I know you're the one who do the work. So thank you, thank you, thank you, and keep up the good work.
Thank you. Mr. Jason Green?
Yes, I would like to echo that. I mean, I'm new and learning. And I tell our membership how humbling this experience is and how what a tight ship this is. And the staff is, I just want to echo these things that their money's in good hand, their retirement security is in good hand. So yes, the staff has been more than accommodating and helpful to me. That being said, I do have something, and maybe it should have been, but for the good of the order. Back to the position authorization, I don't mean to harp on it too much, but I feel it's extremely important. And I need to say something about it. As much as I support and understand the priority of Mr. Grable's investment team getting built up, looking at just with a slight increase in call volume of 500 people, I support that. I absolutely think that is priority. But we are here to push on the Board of Supervisors. I know there's scheduling and stuff like that, big ship, small rudder, but our number one investment is our membership, our people that are paying into this fund and relying on it. And when we see our KPI reduce with a very slight increase in call volume, I mean, back to the staff is weathering this. They're doing more with less. And I think it's support the staff, support the people in the benefit section and everywhere else to have the ability to work and not burden that stress of a member that's, in a new process. So that's it. I don't know how to pressure it. I'm going to contract cities. I might see a couple of the Board of Supervisors there. Who knows? So not that I'm an influencer. So, but anyway, that's my point is that I think it'll lift all boats if we can get more people in there. So that's it.
Thank you. Mr. Rue?
None for me at this time. This is my second meeting, first time doing it by Zoom, so I'm still learning to access everything, and I really appreciate the staff, especially you, Linda, for helping me navigate. And I also thank the investments team, the legal team for helping me steer and learn about everything. And as a matter of fact, I want to thank John Grable and his team for willing to meet me after hours as well to give extra training, which I very much appreciate. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Jones?
Yeah, I just want to echo the sentiments of my fellow trustees to the staff and also to my fellow trustees here. Myself, Mr. Santos got to travel to the Global Infrastructure Conference. One, it was a great opportunity to extend the LACERA brand, if you will, out there in the public to talk about some of the initiatives and some of the cool things that we're doing there. But also, as I was asking John earlier, I think we also view our role as trustees as being kind of touch points, whether it's with members or with other people in the community about the good work that we do here. And I think it's encouraging too to know that even when we have, I appreciate Chairman Santos' reaction to the legal monitoring thing here, but I think that's the right civic tension that should exist around trying to better the community on behalf of a membership, and that little give and forth, and there were no names called, and there wasn't a brawl or anything of that nature that's through there. So I think it's important that in many levels, that level of kind of civic tension and civic intention and goodwill gets multiplied over and over and over again for the benefit of the community. So I just want to say it's a great fun to be a part of that, because I've also been a part of the opposite as well in my prior career. So and without further ado, also special thank you to Linda, who is always so thoughtful in terms of her follow-up and her polite cajoling when responses aren't they're adequate. So all right, thank you.
Mrs. Jones?
Thank you. And I agree. Outside of my children, Linda can find me anywhere. She's awesome. Thank you. I really appreciated the presentation this morning on human capital. It was a nice reminder of what's important and how it's also tangible to financial benefits as well, and the longevity of not just corporations, but also government agencies. And so it's so very important. And I really appreciate the quality of speakers that the staff is able to attain and bring to us and educate us and elevate us. The level of speakers we've had are just phenomenal. Their credentials, their knowledge, their ability to communicate to us at a level we understand and can connect with. So I just really appreciate the extra effort the staff goes through to do that for each meeting. I also like the member spotlight. I thought it was wonderful. I wonder if we can spotlight more. Now that we're really in touch with the value of human capital, do we have to limit it to one? Can we expand it? I just really think that was a great, nice acknowledgement for the members that have put so many years of their life into working for the county. So I really just think that was really special. And then finally, I believe a few other trustees and myself are going to be traveling to my hometown in Philadelphia. We're going to be attending the Wharton School of Business investment training, and I'm excited to learn. It's been a long time since I've been in college, but you know, I'm welcome to expand and open up my mind and get back into the college setting. Might have to pull out some college t-shirts to take with me. But it'll be exciting to be on such a prestigious campus and an opportunity to learn. We looked at the agenda. It's fantastic, the information that we're going to be able to absorb and bring back and have a value to what we do here, you know, every day when we're reviewing and making decisions. Doing it with more education is always, you know, positive. So thank you. And I look forward to attending and bringing some information back at our next meeting.
Excellent. Thank you. John.
Thank you, Linda. And I know that Linda has chipped me as well to keep track of it.
I'm a certified stalker.
You know, I think that, you know, one thing I'll observe is that which we do is increasingly difficult. We're in uncertain times. And what I sense in this meeting and prior meetings, that there's a real sense of commonality. I think it's nice to have kind of that healthy tension, but I think it's constructive and that there's commonality of purpose, which I think really helps us best work in the interests of our members.
Thank you, Steve.
Appreciate the input and guidance today. And with that,
thank you, Leah.
Very nice to be back. It's been over 3 years for me personally, since February 2020. Many Zoom meetings, but I much prefer in person. And secondly, congratulations to staff. Really, the quality of the materials you produce is outstanding. It's among the better ones in the industry, and it has continued to improve over the years. So congratulations. I know a lot of time goes into producing those materials.
Thank you. And Chair Sanchez.
Thank you. So I always like to remind everyone that it's not in moments when we agree that we test our maturity and relationships, but in moments when we disagree. So I think that that it is important to be able to have that discourse in a very collaborative way with the intent of moving forward and building greater trust and getting stronger. So I do want to keep reinforcing that. And so, you know, it's never fun to be called out in a meeting, but it's a bit like a sunburn. It feels worse than it looks. But it is important for all of us as a learning opportunity to kind of keep going forward. So, and I, for one, am a very big proponent of delegated authority, knowing the level of professionalism, qualifications, and career experience it takes to be staff, that it is important to remind everyone that, you know, that building those levels of trust are important, but understanding sort of what feeds that trust is equally important. So I'm gonna, you know, I've been taking my hat. I've seen Mr. Grable now at several conferences. NASP, PPI, actually you weren't at PPI, but at NASP. And I do think that the level that you're performing at as a team is what is setting the tone and what is building the bridges in the trust. And so I just want to, you know, keep supporting that and keep moving toward the goal of the highest and most mature function we can do as an organization. And I also want to give a hats off to the board. I feel like, you know, we are spotting things without being antagonistic, but ensuring that we're getting all of the information we need, whether it's a tax opinion, whether it is, you know, a better guideline for what we need to see in reporting. And that's what governance looks like. So I'm very proud of that. Thank you for all of your hard work as well. So with that, we will move into a heavy executive session item. So how much time do we need?
Alex, 5 minutes? 5 minutes.
All right. Thank you, everyone.
Also, lunch is ready.
Go grab your lunches.